Hi, my name is Philip. So Candace Owens recently mentioned Ben Shapiro being a Talmudic Jew and displayed August Rolling's book, The Talmudic Jew. This book, among others that purport to expose the Talmud, is difficult to find and is a rarity. There is of course good reason for Talmudic Jews to desire to hide the contents of the Talmud or cherry-pick the more humane parts of the Talmud to display to the world at large. While a non-Jew who studies the Noahide laws is worthy of praise, a non-Jew is prohibited from reading the Torah, Old Testament, let alone the oral Torah or Talmud. In quotes, if a non-Jew studies the Talmud, he is subject to the death penalty. Moses Maimonides, Mishnah Torah, Yad Haksaka 10:9. Though access to the Talmud is not a crime if the purpose is not to vex Jews. My purpose is certainly not to vex Jews, but rather to enlighten non-Jews as to what the Talmud teaches about them. If such is vexing, I apologize, but I serve the truth. That is because the Talmud is a racist document that portrays Jews as chosen ones with souls imbued by God and the non-Jews as being worse than a dog, to be exploited in all kinds of ways. Before I expose the Talmud, however, it is important to note that many Jews do not believe in the Talmud, as there are many kinds of Jews. Like all people, there are good Jews and bad Jews, and it is necessary to explore the various sects of Jews to understand which Jews we are talking about, so we do not slander others. Likewise, of course, there are many atheist Jews. The major branches of Judaism. When most people, particularly Christians, think of Jews and their belief, they may perceive Jews as followers of the Old Testament or the Torah. While the Torah is indeed foundational for them, they interpret it through the lens of the Talmud, almost as some Catholics interpret the Bible through the lens of Catholicism, but to a much greater degree, which is regarded as the oral teaching or oral Torah. The authority given to the Talmud in interpreting the Torah varies by sect. In general, Rabbinic Judaism places the Torah as central, and Orthodox Judaism, a subsect of Rabbinic Judaism, considers it essential for interpretation. Conservative Judaism views the Talmud as significant but not essential, while Reform Judaism often sees its historical value rather than its centrality in modern practice. The Talmud consists of a collection of rabbinic discussions, interpretations, and commentaries on the Torah. It has two main parts, the Mishnah, which is the written compilation of Jewish oral laws, and the Gemara, which elaborate on the Mishnah and includes debates and explanations. The writing of the Talmud began around 200 AD, with the compilation of the Mishnah, and the Gemara was subsequently developed, with the Babylonian Talmud being completed around 500 AD. However, the writing just means that is when it was actually being written down. These oral traditions were passed down for much longer time, and could go back before the time of Jesus. And we don't really know exactly how long, but at least I'm not a scholar in this. Anyway, in addition to the Talmud, it is the importance of rabbis. The Talmud encompasses rabbinic discussions and commentaries that elaborate on the Torah, integrating the oral Torah with written teachings. Rabbis serve as spiritual leaders and scholars, guiding communities in religious practice and legal discussions by interpreting these texts. This approach allows for a dynamic and adaptable framework that emphasizes community learning and scholarly debate, shaping the ongoing evolution of Jewish life and practice. Therefore, when we are talking about Talmudic Jews, we are mainly talking about rabbinical Judaism, of which Orthodox Judaism is a type that holds the Talmud as essential for interpretation. Ben Shapiro is an Orthodox Jew. Therefore, he is by definition a Talmudic Jew. Types of Jews. Ashkenazi Jews trace their origins to Central and Eastern Europe. Sephardic Jews are descended from those expelled from Spain and Portugal, primarily settling in the Mediterranean area. Mizrahi Jews originate from Middle Eastern countries such as Iran and Iraq. Ben Shapiro is an Ashkenazi Jew. Ashkenazi Jews are likely not even related to the biblical Jews, while Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews are. Ashkenazis are likely descendants from the Khazarian Empire, which converted to Judaism in the 8th or 9th century. The 13th Tribe by Arthur Koestler explores the theory that Ashkenazi Jews are primarily descended from the Khazars, linking them to the Khazarian Empire's conversion to Judaism. Now, this is not to say that Jews descended from the biblical Jews did not intermarry with some of the Khazars or Ashkenazi Jews. Many Ashkenazi Jews, not many, but some Ashkenazi Jews do indeed can trace their ancestry back to biblical roots, though there is a lot of Caucasian Khazarian blood in them as well, which is why the IDF does not encourage their soldiers to get blood tested, because often it's the case that there's no link to the Middle East. But it's not that all Ashkenazi Jews are not descended from biblical Jews. It's just that some are probably not. And yet, when it comes to Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews, they generally do have a direct connection to the biblical Jews. That may be because, so the reason the book, The 13th Tribe, presents a compelling narrative and has sparked significant discussions, it is important to note that many historians and geneticists criticize its conclusions. Though that may be that's probably because Ashkenazi Jews don't want to admit that they are not descended from Jews of the Bible. Again, like the IDF telling their soldiers not to get tested just because they're going to be disappointed, finding that they're actually European or really Khazarian. And Khazar was an empire that was somewhere near Ukraine and like Kazakhstan a little bit. I'm not entirely sure. You'd have to look that up. And that's not the point of this discussion per se. So, with that out of the way, let's get into some of the controversial things that the Talmud has to say. If a Gentile hits a Jew, the Gentile must be killed. Striking a Jew is in God's eyes an assault on the divine presence. Sanhedrin 58b. Now, when I say these quotes, they're all from the Babylonian Talmud. Like, Sanhedrin 58b is a portion from the Babylonian Talmud. All the blessings which Gentiles enjoy come to them only because of God's regard for Israel. Yeb Moth 63a. A Jew need not pay a Gentile the wages owed to him for work. Sanhedrin 57a. If an ox of an Israelite gores an ox of a Canaanite, there is no liability. But if an ox of a Canaanite gores an ox of an Israelite, the payment is to be in full. Baba Kama 37b. Gentiles are inclined to bestiality, lewdness, and murder. Gentiles prefer sexual relations with cows more than their own wives. Eve had sexual intercourse with the serpent, transmitting lust to the Gentiles, from which Israelites are exempt. Aboda Zarah 22a. A Gentile who observes a day of rest deserves death. Sanhedrin 58b. Now here's a story from Biakoth 58a. A Jew was flogged by a rabbi for sexual intercourse with the Gentile. The Jew went to the Romans, who in turn asked the rabbi why he had done this. The rabbi told the Germans that the Jew who was punished had engaged in sexual intercourse with a female donkey. The Romans exonerated the rabbi after this and declared that the rabbi was telling the truth. And after this, the Jew who was flogged called the rabbi a liar. The rabbi replied he didn't lie, since all Gentiles are donkeys. The Jew who had been punished decided to tell the Romans what had really transpired, but the rabbi killed him. The rabbi was justified in killing him. Which goes to say they're comparing Gentiles to donkeys. So it's like just having sex with an animal, essentially. And also that such a thing is almost worthy of, the rabbi was justified in killing him for calling him a liar, and because in the rabbinic tradition, rabbis are held as sacrosanct, and you shouldn't argue with them, essentially. And also that having sex with a Gentile being so lowly is worthy of death. This person was just killed for this. Anyway, a Gentile who observes... we've already gone through that one. God is displeased when Jews show hospitality to Gentiles. Sanhedrin 104a. It is permissible to cheat a Gentile in court. Baba Kama 113a. For executing a Gentile, only one person's testimony is necessary. To kill a Jew, 2 witnesses are necessary. Sanhedrin 57b, which is to say the life of a Jew is much more important than that of a Gentile. If a Jew finds an object lost by a Gentile, it does not have to be returned. Baba Mezia 24a and Baba Kama 113b. Whoever returns a lost article to a Gentile is under the curse of God. Sanhedrin 76a. Property of the Gentiles is like the desert. Whoever among the Jews gets there first owns it. Baba Bathra 54b. A Gentile must pay wages to a Jew, but a Jew does not have to pay wages to a Gentile. Sanhedrin 57a. The Gentiles are outside the protection of the law, and God has exposed their money to Israel. Baba Kama 37b. Regarding thy neighbor and the good the Torah says a Jew owes to one's neighbor is negated by the Talmud. A non-Jew is not considered a neighbor. The Jew, by his source, and in his very essence, is entirely good. The Goy, by his source, and in his very essence, is completely evil. This is not simply a matter of religious distinction, but rather of 2 completely different species. And Jewish success in the world is completely contingent upon the failure of other peoples. Jews experience good fortune only when Gentiles experience catastrophe. The difference between Jews and Gentiles is not historic or cultural, but rather genetic and unalterable. Rabbi Saida Grama of Beth Midrash Gavoha, a renowned Talmudic academy in Lakewood, New Jersey, from which I'm going to find another quote. Give me 1 minute. In Remumot Yisrael Ufarashat Hagalut, Rabbi Grama further states that the Torah mandates that Jews, while in exile, should employ such means as appeasement, deception, duplicity, and bribery in dealing with Gentiles. Romemot Yisrael Ufarashat Hagalut was endorsed by the most eminent rabbinic authorities at the Lakewood Yeshiva, including the Rosh Yeshiva, head of the academy, Rabbi Aryeh Malkiel Kotler, who praised Grama's book for its teaching on the subject of the exile, the election of Israel, and her exaltation above and superiority to all other nations, all in accordance with the viewpoint of the Torah, based on the solid instruction he has received from his teachers. Rabbi Cutler's Lakewood Yeshiva offers bachelor and master's degree programs in Talmud instruction accredited by the State of New Jersey's Commission on Higher Education and funded by American taxpayers through a Holocaust subsidy. The U.S. Congress, as part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2004, awarded the yeshiva $500,000 in federal funds to establish a Holocaust memorial library. $500,000 shall be awarded to the Beth Midrash Gavoha, Lakewood, New Jersey, for equipment and exhibits for the Holocaust Library. The taxpayer funding was sponsored by New Jersey's U.S. Senators John Corzine and Frank Lautenberg, so you were paying for much of this racist propaganda. Another one, Rabbi Cook the Elder, the revered father of the Messianic tendency in Jewish fundamentalism, said the difference between a Jewish soul and the soul of non-Jews, all of them in all different levels, is greater and deeper than the difference between a human soul and the souls of cattle. Rabbi Cook's entire teaching is followed devoutly by, among others, those who have led the settler movement in the occupied West Bank, according to the ideologies which underlie Gush Emunim, the militant West Bank settlers group. In Hasidism, non-Jews have satanic souls. Members of Gush Emunim argue that what appears to be confiscation of Arab-owned land for subsequent settlement by Jews is in reality not an act of stealing, but one of sanctification. From their perspective, the land is redeemed by being transferred from the satanic to the divine sphere. Now, another way in which the Talmud really distorts the Torah or the Bible is the verse "Thou shalt love thy fellow as thyself," Leviticus 19:13, is understood by classical and present-day Orthodox Judaism as being an indication to love one's fellow Jew, not any fellow human being. And remember, Ben Shapiro is a Talmudic Jew, so he is told to love other Jews, not just other humans. In fact, we'll find out just how deep the misanthropy of Jews goes towards the rest of the human race. If a Gentile kills a Jew, the Gentile is to be killed. But if a Jew kills a Gentile, the Jew is to go free. Sanhedrin 57a. If a Gentile kills a Jew, the Gentile is to be killed, but if a Jew kills a Gentile, the Gentile is to go free. Sanhedrin 57a, I just repeated that. Relying upon the code of Maimonides and the Halakha, the Gush Emunim leader Rabbi Ariel stated, "A Jew who killed a non-Jew is exempt from human judgment and has not violated the religious prohibition to murder." So all those Gazans killed, well, no big deal. Jewish blood and the blood of a Goy are not the same thing. Yitzhak Ginsburg is one of the Lubavitcher sect's leading authorities on Jewish mysticism, says the St. Louis-born rabbi, who also has a degree in mathematics, speaking freely of Jews' genetic-based spiritual superiority over non-Jews. Ginsburg told Jewish Week, "If a Jew needs a liver, can you take the liver of an innocent non-Jew passing by to save him? The Torah would probably permit that. Jewish life has an infinite value. There is something infinitely more holy and unique about Jewish life than non-Jewish life." So this almost reminds me of Lubavitcher. Wasn't it the Chabad Lubavitch Center that had that mattress, that little mattress with the blood on it? Well, who knows? Allegedly, maybe they were organ harvesting, or maybe even worse, as we'll find later, how the Talmud views sex with minors. The prohibition, "Thou shalt not murder," applies only to a Jew who kills a Jew. Torah Hamelech, rabbinic book. In the Torah Hamelech, rabbinic authors write, "The non-Jews are uncompassionate by nature, and attacks on them curb their evil inclination." This is reminiscent of the statement of Professor Paul Eidelberg. If Germany is peaceful today, it's not only because it was conquered in war, but because the desire to conquer others was bombed out of the German people. It also recalls the statement of former Sephardi Chief Rabbi Mordecai Eliyahu, "All civilians living in Gaza are collectively guilty for Qassam attacks on Sderot." His son Shmuel Eliyahu, the chief rabbi of Safed, elaborated on his father's view, saying that he advocated carpet bombing the general area from which the Qassams were launched, regardless of the price in Palestinian life. Now, don't we see this today? Very much we see this. Carpet bombing, complete destruction. Furthermore, in the Torah Hamelech, when we approach a non-Jew who has violated the 7 Noahide laws and kill him out of concern for upholding these 7 laws, no prohibition has been violated, the rabbinic authors say. They emphasize that killing is forbidden unless it is done in obedience to a court ruling, but later in the book the authors loosen the prohibition with a loophole, noting that it applies only to a proper system that deals with non-Jews who violate the 7 Noahide commandments. Now consider that all Christians are in violation of the Noahide commandments on the account of idolatry, which we'll get to later. In any situation in which a non-Jew's presence endangers Jewish lives, the non-Jew may be killed even if he is a righteous Gentile and not at all guilty for the situation that has been created, the authors state. Even if he is a righteous Gentile. Here we see the rabbinic grounds for the murder of even those non-Jews who support Judaism in the Israeli state. So Christianity is judged to be idol worship by every major halakhic authority from Maimonides. Maimonides is a very famous Jewish scholar who is highly revered. Chavetz Chaim, idol worship is a death penalty offense under the Noahide law. Jesus himself is frequently referred to as an idol in popular Orthodox Judaic literature. It is forbidden to praise them. I'm talking about the Gentiles, us. Even to say, how good-looking is that Gentile? Certainly you are not to speak in praise of a Gentile's deeds or to respect any of his words, for this also comes under the heading, you shall not show them grace. Kitzer Shulchan Aruch, 176:15. And regarding the Gazans, there's a word Shoah in Hebrew. It means annihilation. It's synonymous with annihilation as far back as 1985, which has been obviously their policy towards Gaza. And here is a poor victim of the Shoah and Jewish racism towards the Gazans. Now, from another text, Goyim were born only to serve us. Without that, they have no place in the world, only to serve the people of Israel. With Gentiles, it will be like any person. They need to die, but God will give them longevity. Why? Imagine that one's donkey would die. They'd lose their money. This is his servant. That's why he gets a long life, to work well for this Jew. Why are Gentiles needed? They will work, they will plow, they will reap. We will sit like an effendi and eat. This is why the Gentiles were created. Rabbi Ovadia Yusuf, senior Sephardic posek and head of the Shas Council of Torah sages. Sermon on the Laws Regarding Non-Jews. Source Yusuf. Gentiles exist only to serve Jews. Jerusalem Post, October 18th, 2010. And converts to Judaism are not to be trusted under certain circumstances. In fact, I've read somewhere else, I can't think of the exact quote right here, but converts are treated, especially female converts, are even to be raped. They're not treated very well. And I found out personally, as I'll explain later, that a convert is never really Jewish, never really seen as Jewish by other Jews, at least the Orthodox and Hasidim. I mean, the Reformed and Conservative, it might be a little different. In fact, it's probably, the liberal Jews, it's very different, in fact. But here we're talking about the most strict rabbinical forms of Judaism. That is, those that actually adhere to the Talmud. Are we going to talk about the rabbinic texts as a virulent source of anti-black racism? There is no Harold Brackman, PhD, from The Ebb and Flow of Conflict, A History of Black and Jewish Relations through 1900. There is no denying that the Babylonian Talmud was the first source to read a negrophobic content into the episode of Ham, Noah, and Canaan. Harold Brackman, PhD. The process of dissimulation through the substitution of code words Cush for Negro and Cush for Goy in the Soncino edition of the Talmud is a feature of numerous texts of the religion of Judaism. The most virulent source of anti-black racism in the West, often mistakenly attributed to the Bible, centers on the story of Ham and Noah's cursing of Canaan. Let us make clear a fact which others have concealed. The biblical curse of enslavement in Genesis chapter 9 has no specific racial identification and contains no anti-black bigotry. We're talking here about the mark of Cain, in which Cain was punished, or in the whole Canaanite group. And you can see here why Candace, who I see as a champion of the people at this era in time, is rightfully pissed off with Talmudic Judaism, because it's if they view us whites badly, they view the blacks even worse, and various shades of brown as well. Brackman quoted from the Talmud's version of Genesis chapter 9, citing what he calls an important Talmudic version of the myth. Ham is told by his outraged father that because you have abused me in the darkness of the night, your children shall be born black and ugly. Because you have twisted your head to cause me embarrassment, they shall have kinky hair and red eyes. Because your lips jested at my expense, theirs shall swell. And because you neglected my nakedness, they shall go naked. So this is very much anti-black hatred, and Jewish-black relations are somewhat of a deceitful. Jews have always been deceiving the blacks, pretending to be their friends and very liberal, and yet, meanwhile, their religion teaches the worst things about them. In fact, Moses Maimonides, again Maimonides being the great scholar, in his Guide to the Perplexed, taught that blacks are subhuman. Though I think Goys in general are kind of considered to be animals anyway, but they have a special hate for the blacks, and consider the mark of Cain to be blackness, and that black people are cursed, which explains their role in the slave trade. An interesting story here is that with the Nation of Islam, Louis Farrakhan published an astounding study, The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews, which basically calls them out for their role in the slave trade. And the Jews, instead of apologizing for this, were offended and sought to to hamper the publishing and distribution of the copies of this book, because they were offended by what it said about Jews. So no worry here about what happened with the slave trade, their role in the slave trade, but be all offended about being called out, essentially. That's anti-Semitic. Anything Jews don't like is essentially anti-Semitic. It used to be anti-Semitism were those who hated Jews. Now anti-Semitism is anything that Jews hate. The Talmudists have a penchant for branding Gentiles of the American Southland, Southerners, as the paradigm of vociferous advocacy of slavery, racism, and oppression, even as the Judaic dynasties, which historically profited from the slave trade, reinvented themselves in the 1960s as apostles of black civil rights. According to Israel Shahak in Jewish History, a Jewish Religion, quite a few of Martin Luther's rabbinical supporters were anti-black racists who supported him for tactical reasons of Jewish interests, wishing to win black support for American Jewry and for Israel's policies. Scorch's devious tactics are evident to any specialist in the field. One of his missions is to explain away the preponderance of anti-black invective in sacred rabbinic texts. This gets interesting because the Old Testament contains no anti-black invective. Ergo, in the course of exploring anti-black invective in Judaism, the student of this subject receives an immediate education in the hidden side of the Jewish Torah, its vast Talmudic, Kabbalistic, Midrashic, and Aggadic traditions. The most virulent anti-black racist in Judaism is Moses Maimonides, who taught in his Guide to the Perplexed that blacks are subhuman, as I said before. There's a lot that we can go on to say. I'm citing now from a book, this book here, Judaism's Strange Gods by Michael Hoffman. I recommend a copy. I don't think you can find it on, you can search on Amazon. I don't know if they have it on mainstream sites anymore. But yeah, there's a special hatred for blacks, and there's also a special hatred for Christians in the Talmud, and we'll get to the Christians next. But yeah, so I can see why Candace is upset, and and she's definitely going to be called an anti-Semite for talking about the Talmudic Jew by August Rolling, which I had a copy. I recently sold it. I need to get, and I'm getting more. If you want a copy of that book, I leave a message, leave a comment, and I'll get in touch with you, and we'll find a way that if you want one, I can get you some, because I'm ordering a lot of them to provide truth about what is going on. Because the white and black divide is largely a Jewish creation, and that's not to say whites haven't been, like the KKK, Freemasonic KKK members haven't done a lot to and people like Nick, what's his name, Nick Fuentes, have played a role. I guess Nick Fuentes, like, he obviously just hates Candace because she's black and she's a female. Two things he does not like. And I think Candace is a champion of the people. She's almost saintly. She's a modern day Joan of Arc in a sense. I think she's standing up against the powers right now, against very powerful people, putting her life at risk. I don't know actually how much longer it can last. It's almost unprecedented that she's being allowed to challenge the status quo in the way that we've never been allowed to challenge it. I mean, you can talk about anything, but question this one topic, and well, you're not allowed to talk about that. The reason I created this video is in large part thanks to Candace, and I praise her. And I think I would encourage whites to try to seek good relations with black people, because we have much more in common than not, and it's just a color as far as I'm concerned. I mean, Nick Fuentes points out certain statistics, but he's really just talking about what poverty does to people, and certain cultural cesspits, and the cultural cesspits have been created by Hollywood propaganda, rapping propaganda, who's behind that, which makes young blacks look up to gangsters and thugs, but in their hearts, they're I think all black people, like white people, are at the same initial, and we're essentially equal. I see no being betterness or less than. Even with Jews, it's not a matter of worse or better. In fact, I actually tend to think that Jews are in some ways not at all inferior. I think that is a ridiculous thing to call them as inferior. In a sense, their culture is superior, but that's a very weird thing to say. And superior in what way? In that they navigate the world better than we do. Their religion allows them to navigate this world and make money in this world better than we do. Now, are they superior spiritually? I think actually the opposite. Now, there are some Jews who are really great people and haven't let the poison reach their heart, and there are beautiful Jews out there. But in general, the religion is inferior as a spiritual religion, but I see it as superior in uniting a people and giving them such a small proportion of the world, and yet so much influence. Obviously, it's not an inferior culture. It is not. Anyone who says that is lying, and that's also why they need to be taken seriously. We need to pay attention to what they're doing. They're not just inferior people who can't. I mean, they're pulling the strings. They're very much in charge. Though superior and inferior are really just nonsense words. It's only in relation to a genre or something we're talking to. As I said, if we're talking about the world, then their religion helps. Their religion and cultural and race unity helps them very much. Anyway, enough on that. But again, my prodding here is that blacks and whites should unite. We should not be divided. We need to work together again to free ourselves. United we stand, divided we fall. And we should even accept good Jews who want. I mean, there are so many good Jews who I'm trying to think. The Holocaust industry. I mean, there's so many. Lilienthal wrote The Zionist Connection. There are a lot of Jews who are exposing the connections here, and we should exposing what's going on in Gaza and also in their own religion, and we should work with them as well. We all need to work together here, and I'm proud of Candace for being a champion. She's a wonderful person. I mean, I don't know her personally, but as far as what she's doing online, it's a beautiful thing to behold. And I don't agree with everything she says. I very much applaud her efforts. Now, on to Christians. Well, before that, women, actually. The view of women. Kedushin 66c says, the best of the Gentiles, kill him. The best of snakes, smash its skull. The best of women is filled with witchcraft. The more possessions, the more worry, the more wives, the more witchcraft. Hillel, 1st century AD, Mishnah, Abbot 2:7. And Hillel is another greatly respected Jew. There's, I think, a Hillel Foundation or something like that. So very well respected among the Jews. Now another one is, husbands may treat their wives like meat from the butcher's shop. The Talmud permits the Judaic husband to sodomize his wife to his heart's content, since Chazal, the Talmudic sages, decreed that she is not entirely a human being, but rather a piece of meat from a butcher's shop. Anal sex and other practices are permissible to the Judaic husband because in his relationship with his wife, he is dealing not with a woman but meat. This designation feminists rightly decry, and here is a religion that formally prescribes it. In considering which sexual practices are fitting for the husband and wife, the Talmud states concerning intimate relations with the Judaic wife, in quotes, meat which comes from the butcher shop may be eaten, salted, roasted, cooked, or boiled. So with fish from the fishmonger. Nedarim 20. Yeah. And, I think what's interesting is there are many liberal Jews who are feminists, and it's almost a reaction against this from this Talmudic, the things in within their own religion. But I think the liberal Jews have gone a bit too far. I am a traditionalist, though that said, I respect women, and I think they should be treated as you should treat your wife as you treat yourself. That's how I view my wife. And, I'd only do things that, I try to do things that please her and wouldn't want to hurt her. So this is quite, even a traditionalist, I do think there are certain roles for men and women. That said, we're both human beings and should love each other, not treat your wife like a piece of meat. So that's kind of disgusting here. And it also goes against the whole notion that Jews are at the forefront of advocating for the feminine movement and all these other liberal movements. It's just a reaction against their own religion, it seems like. Now, what about Gentile women? If they say this about their own wives, what do they think about Gentile women? What is Judaism's teaching about Gentile women? Judaism teaches that all female Gentiles, without exception, are regarded as menstrual filth, slaves, heathen, and whores. This disgusting litany is expressed by the alphabetic abbreviation NSHGZ, Nida, Shisha, Goya, and Zona, from Sanhedrin 81b through 82a. Now, interestingly, Jews prohibit, the Talmud prohibits Jews from entering a church. Well, however, it does not prohibit, this is Maimonides here, forbid a Jew from entering a mosque, which is interesting. And Rabbi Moses Maimonides ruled unequivocally that true Christians are idol worshippers. Now, I'm not personally Christian myself. I do believe that Jesus was the Messiah, that is, that he was the anointed one for the Jews to follow, and that he's a prophet. And I do believe him as a prophet, but I do not believe that he's God. I think that he was deified after death. But that's just my view. So I actually fall more in line with Islam. I'm not practicing. So that's just where I stand. Doesn't really matter, though, if you agree with me or not. That's just my personal opinion. So Christians are allied with hell, and Christianity is worse than incest. Avoda Zarah 17a. And I want to say I don't agree with this. I have a great respect for Christianity, actually. I was Christian for many years, and both Protestant and Catholic. I enjoyed the Catholicism a bit more, to be honest. It made more sense to me, and so I support Candace in her Catholicizing. Anyway, Christians are allied with hell, and Christianity is worse than incest. Going to prostitutes is the same as becoming a Christian. Those who read the Gospels are doomed to hell. Sanhedrin 90a. When the Messiah comes, he will destroy the Christians. Sanhedrin 99a. So watch out for the Messiah. I mean, when they get the false Messiah that will lead them, this great leader, whoever, probably some kind of Hitler for the Jews, will be intent on destroying. To fulfill prophecy of the Talmud, will need to destroy the Christians. Now, Christians, minim, is what they're called, and others who reject the Talmud will go to hell and be punished there for all generations. Sanhedrin 90a. Those who read the New Testament on canonical books will have no portion in the world to come. BT Rosh Hashanah 17a. Jews must destroy the books of Christians. For example, the New Testament. The books of the Minim Christians may not be saved from a fire, but they must be burnt in their places. Shabbat 116a. And the murder of Christian missionaries is encouraged. A person who proselytizes any single Jew, whether man or woman, on behalf of false deities should be stoned to death. This applies even if neither the proselyte or the Jew actually worshipped a false deity. As long as he instructed him to worship the false deity, he should be executed by stoning. Moses, Maimonides, Mishnah Torah, Hilkot, Avodat, Kovachim, V. Choko Tiahim 51. And the 12th invocation, formerly the 19th of the Amidah, the central prayer of Judaism, recited 3 times a day, is the Birat HaMinim, the curse on Christians. And about the mother of Jesus, the Blessed Virgin Mary, in Catholicism, they call her a whore, saying, she who was the descendant of princes and governors played the harlot with carpenters. Sanhedrin 106a. And in footnote to Shabbat 104b of the Centino edition, it is stated that the uncensored text of the Talmud, it is written that Jesus' mother, Miriam, the hairdresser, had sex with many men. So I don't understand why Christian Zionism is a thing, and Judeo-Christianity is an oxymoron. Doesn't make any sense. So Christians, y'all need to wake up. Yeah, seriously, because you're getting played. Your goodwill is being used against you. Another one is Jesus stood up a brick to symbolize an idol and bowed down to it. Jesus performed magic and incited the people of Israel and led them astray. Sanhedrin 106b of the Babylonian Talmud, volume 21, translated by Rabbi Aiden Steinsaltz, published by Random House, New York. That might be too much information there, but yes, from the Talmud. And certain Orthodox Judaic organizations, and remember, Ben Shapiro is an Orthodox Jew, were even more forthcoming, openly admitting that the Talmud describes Jesus as a sorcerer and a demented sex freak. These rabbinic organizations make this admission perhaps out of the conceit that their supremacy is so well entrenched in the modern world that they need not concern themselves with adverse reactions. On the website of the Chabad Lubavitch group, we find the following statement accompanied by citations from the Talmud. The Talmud, Babylonian edition, records other sins of Jesus the Nazarene. He and his disciples practiced sorcery and black magic, led Jews astray into idolatry, and were sponsored by foreign Gentile powers for the purpose of subverting Jewish worship. Sanhedrin 43a. He was sexually immoral, worshipped statues of stone, a brick is mentioned, was cut off from the Jewish people for his wickedness, and refused to repent. Sanhedrin 107b. Sota and Sotas 47a. He learned witchcraft in Egypt. Shabbos 104b. And end quote from Chabad Lubavitch. And then, of course, the common quote from Gittin 57a says Jesus is in hell being boiled in hot excrement. Yeah, so that's what they say of your Savior, and that is and Jesus of Nazareth, who imagined that he was the Messiah and was executed by the court, was also alluded to in Daniel's prophecies. The lawless among your people shall exalt themselves in an attempt to fulfill the vision, but they shall fail. Maimonides, Mishnah Torah, Hilkot, Malachim, 11:4. Maimonides declares in the Mishnah Torah Hilkot Melachim 11:4 continued, can there be a greater stumbling block than Christianity? Now what's interesting, so you have the Talmud's opinion of Christianity as being a heresy that is essentially, they consider it to be idolatry, which breaks the Noahide, which is a violation of the Noahide laws, incurring the penalty of death. And should we be afraid of the Noahide laws? Well, I believe there's this Adam Green who talks a lot about the Noahide laws. He knows a lot more about that. I recommend watching some of his videos on the development of the Noahide laws being implemented. But even in book I have, again, this Judaism Strange Gods by Michael Hoffman, he warns that these are being taken seriously, essentially. So the late and quoting extensive from Maimonides, the following proclamation was printed at the bottom of the advertisement, not just for Jews. The rabbi's message extends to all mankind. Through adherence to the core principles of the 7 Noahide laws, these laws include establishment of a system of laws and justice, emphasis supplied. The late Schneerson's followers exerts considerable influence over the U.S. government. Don't we know about the Zionist influence of U.S. government? Its leading rabbis have been regular visitors of the White House since the administration of Jimmy Carter, and the frequency of visits increased with each subsequent administration. Well, now with Trump, pushing in Netanyahu's chair, acting like a servant. Essentially in this book, they're saying that the Noahide setup is above all a legal system which will eventually develop courts and a judiciary with the power to impose capital punishment for grievous infringements on the Noahide laws. One death penalty offense under the Noahide law, rabbinic legal system is, again, as I said, idolatry. And since Maimonides has ruled that Christians are idolaters, it is not difficult to see that the 102nd U.S. Congress and the numerous churchmen who promote submission to the Noahide laws, wittingly or unwittingly, have laid the groundwork for the execution at some future date of authentic Christians, individually by trial before a rabbinic judge or en masse. Now, do you think this is totally crazy to think that the Jews could create a system where the Noahide laws are implemented? Well, is it not obvious their great control of our own government and the support we give to Israel to commit genocide, the amount of money we give, billions, probably $1 trillion over the year, at least hundreds of billions been given to Israel. They have health insurance there, which is subsidized by our taxpayer money. And so how hard is it to believe that at some point in time they could gain even more control? Particularly if America were to wane and Israel were to become what's called the Pax Judaica, a ruling power among nations, which is their dream. And and there's actually a quote in the New York Times that said the New World Order belongs to the Jews. I've got to find that quote at some point, but it was the New York Times, and it says the New World Order belongs to the Jews. So this New World Order that they're trying to implement has something in common with Judaism, and has it, or involves Judaism, and why I don't really know, but that's something to get into the Adam Green YouTube videos on. Though I think Adam Green may be racist. I don't know. I applaud his efforts at spreading the truth, but I don't know if he is racist towards other peoples just because of skin color or not. I don't know. This is allegedly. I have no idea, but otherwise I recommend him. I don't think I've really heard of anything of him going against blacks or anything. I'm highly sensitive to racism because I'm in an interracial marriage. My wife is Latina, and so I don't like racism. Of course, I'm probably going to be accused of racism by Jews in this video, but this is merely exposing what is thought of us in order so that people can become aware and defend ourselves, defend our own interests. There's nothing wrong with having your own interests. But yeah, and so on to some incestual stuff that's talked about. But again, Christians really need to be wary here because they're going to be the ones really in trouble. The Muslims that are not, though they're being targeted, for all these wars to gain territory for a greater Israel project, the Muslims are not in violation of the Noahide laws because they worship God and not any man or quote unquote idols. And again, this is not a judgment on Christians. I think the Christian movement is even bigger and better than, and it's sad that Muslims aren't really speaking out much. They speak out on Palestine because it's within their interest, but when it comes to the New World Order and all these things, I don't see many Muslims speaking up. I see Christians speaking up. So there's something about Christianity that I really admire, in which the truth is espoused, and the truth is something to be valued. I remember my people perish for lack of knowledge being a quote. That's from the Old Testament, but something that's very true these days, and something Christians have alluded to. Anyway, let's get on with it. So 9 years old is a very important age for boys, and 3 years old is the important age for girls when it comes to sex. Now, the Babylonian Talmud, Ketubot 11b, says intercourse with a boy under 9 years old is not considered a significant sexual act. And Sanhedrin 54b, a child less than 9 years old cannot be the object of sodomy. But afterward, I guess find out. Moses Maimonides confirmed that the ruling about an adult being exempt from liability for having sex with a boy less than 9 years of age fully support the halakha that the age of 9 is the key factor in determining when sex with a boy is permissible. Judaism's halakha is derived from the sages of the Babylonian Talmud, amounts to a free pass for Talmudic child molesters. But only in those circumstances where they will not be detected by Gentiles in a Gentile-dominant society that objects to molestation of children. Where Talmudists are dominant or Gentile society is pagan, concerns about detection are vitiated, important essentially, are enhanced. It is important to note that among non-religious Judaics, these rabbinic laws permitting molestation are mostly unknown. The majority of Judaics would be as distressed at learning of their existence as anyone else. And Sanhedrin 69b, sex between a Judaic woman and a child, the halakha law of BT Sanhedrin 69b are recorded by Rabbi Adin Stesaltz, the head of the modern Sanhedrin. In terms of sex with a male child, the age of 9 is a determining factor, no matter what the gender of the pederast, whether an adult woman or an adult man. In Sanhedrin 69b, it is argued that a woman having sex with a boy less than 9 is an act that is exempt from punishment and therefore permission, and does not render her a prostitute. But it gets worse, actually. So it gets worse in that if a girl is less than 3 years old, it is permitted to be secluded with her. Likewise, if a boy is less than 9 years old, a woman is permitted to be alone with him. Kitzer Shulchan Aruch, Classic Guide to Jewish Law. Now, the Shulchan Aruch, if I'm pronouncing that well, is another interesting text which I am ordering, and we'll do a YouTube on at some point. If a grown man has intercourse with a little girl, it is nothing. For having intercourse with a girl less than 3 years old is like putting a finger in the eye. Ketubot 11b. Gross. Most of these acts of perversion performed between Orthodox Judaic men and young boys or Orthodox Judaic women and young boys are hushed up thanks to a culture of silence, because in Judaic law, a moser, also spelled moiser, is one who stoops to maser in form on a fellow Jew, which is technically a death penalty offense drawn from the halakhic conception of mesira, defined as handing over a Judaic to an anti-Semitic state government that could do harm to the Judaic in question. Under such circumstances, the criminality of the Judaic is not an issue. So, yeah, there's reasons why we find that the child trafficking involves the likes of Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Maxwell's, Epstein's, they're both Jewish. Yeah, there's a reason, because it's permitted, it's permissible, and it's even, whereas other cultures and religions, there's a moral conscious pang that would come with it from various religions or whatever. I mean, not saying that, of course, there are many Gentiles who do nasty, terrible things, but it's not in our religion to make it permissible and okay, so that pangs of conscience don't arise. The Jews can do such things as usury, theft, and even molestation, it looks like, so long as they don't get caught, without pangs of conscience. I mean, the Talmud makes it so that they're raised in an environment where they think this kind of thing is okay, and that Gentiles are to be used and for their own pleasure and enrichment. Now, these quotations and readings may explain why during college, when I wanted a room with a Jewish friend at one point, and I found out that he was forbidden to room with me because I'm not Jewish, which is interesting. But and I had many experiences like that. There's another case when I was in fourth grade. I was new to a school. I sat down to a table to eat because I didn't know where to eat, and I was told this is a Jewish table, and so I left. I didn't think much of it then, but I think about it now. There's another case too when I played baseball, and I was terrible at baseball. I was, spacing out, and I was in the outfield because that's a position for the space cadets and people who aren't that great at it. And a ball was thrown, and I didn't notice, and people were yelling, "Phil, Phil," and getting me to pay attention. I finally paid attention and got it, and then got the ball and threw it. And I later went to the coach, and the coach, who was Jewish, was really angry with me. I mean, he broke out in Hebrew, swearing at me. I'm pretty sure he was swearing at me. I actually ran off crying. I was in second grade. I was a little kid. I didn't know what the heck was going on then. And, I was actually kind of traumatizing. I remember that. And I remember hating baseball ever after that. It's like, it gave me a bad taste. I did not go back after that. But yeah, so they're all, and yet this friend who, who I wanted to be my roommate in college, and he wanted to roommate with me too. He was a good guy, Jonah. But he very matter-of-factly was like, "No, I can't because you're not Jewish," and he saw nothing wrong with that yet, and yet he was very sensitive to anti-Semitism. So it's this hypocrisy. There's this great hypocrisy that they can tell other, and there's another example of this in college. At University of Connecticut, I knew this girl named Shana. I actually really liked her. She was a Hasidic Jew, and I met her through working on a statistics project, and we became friends. She was extremely intelligent, the only one who beat me on tests, and in that class. She always beat me, even though she was always off for Jewish holidays and barely in class. She was extremely intelligent, and yet we would meet after school in empty classrooms and talk. Because at that point I was interested in Judaism, and because of her, I basically was kind of thinking I would convert for you, and so I was asking her a lot about Judaism, and what I found out from her was the same kind of stuff I'm finding from the Talmud, and she was very blatant about it. She said things like the mark of Cain is being black, or being dark, and that it's in that. And I was like, well, in the Old Testament, because having been Christian, I knew that the story of Joshua and that chapter of the Bible, the Old Testament, um, basically says it's okay to, God commands Joshua to ethnically cleanse a whole people. And there's a few incidents in the Bible of ethnic cleansing. And I asked her, is that kind of thing still like okay for Jews these days? And she said, yeah. She admitted to it, and she said, that's what they think of the Palestinians, that they need to be cleansed. And now we're seeing it. But what ultimately got me is I asked her, but if I were to convert, would people actually see me as Jewish? I mean, I look really not Jewish at all. During my life, I was told by Jewish people, you look like Hans himself, portraying me as German. I'm actually not German, but and my grandparents fought the Germans. Not that the Germans are bad people. I greatly respect them, and I actually think Britain was responsible for both world wars. But that's a whole different topic. You can actually see my other video on the hidden history of World War II on that. World War I, sorry. The video I made on that, about that. But she basically said, no, you'll never be seen as a Jew, but your children will be. That is, if I married her or another Jew. Because being Jewish is really defined as your mother's Jewish. I mean, of course, in some Reform and more liberal Jewish groups, I might be seen as Jewish, but I feel like it's kind of like a liberal Christianity. It's like that's not the real Christianity. And I was interested in the real thing, which would probably be Orthodox or Hasidic. If I were to actually do it, I'd want to do it like all the way. But when I started learning these things, it just really, exclusive nature of Judaism was really off-putting to me. But yeah, and I learned so much from her, and she would just tell me these things so matter-of-factly, and yet she would say she had like not a Judar, but like she could sense anti-Semites. And she was super sensitive to it. She could basically tell who's anti-Semitic, and so it's like this super sensitivity towards any criticism of their own people, and yet they are totally cool being racist themselves. It's crazy, and people need to wake up to that. That's why one of the reasons I've made this video. Now, through many experiences in life, I really do believe Jewish people are the most racist and hateful of all peoples. The Talmudic upbringing instills hatred towards outsiders and Jewish supremacy. The Talmud and some Torah passages instruct Jews to be misanthropic, cultivating hatred towards those deemed inferior. Hatred and immorality sanctioned by their own laws, which allows them to lie, cheat, and steal without pangs of conscience. We're comparable to dogs and camels to be exploited for the sake of the Jew. Even the Old Testament itself, if you read it as a Jew, is pretty self-aggrandizing and narcissistic. Leads to narcissistic tendencies. Now here's an example. Let people serve you, and nations bow down to you. Genesis 27:29. You shall rule over many nations. They shall be afraid of you. Deuteronomy 15:6. Foreigners shall build up your walls, and the kings shall minister to you. Trump, ministering, didn't you? Anyway, that men may bring you the wealth of all nations. Isaiah 60:10-11. You shall eat the wealth of nations. Isaiah 61:6. Now, isn't that true? The Jews are definitely by out of proportion, extremely rich through the use of usury over the ages, have always ate up the wealth of nations, and right now that's very much the case as well. I don't have the statistics on me, but I've seen some, and maybe in another video I'll get into that. So it's evident in numerous Talmudic passages that Christians are the most reviled, as well as blacks. The reason for this, in my estimation, is a form of inoculation, well, at least towards Christianity, is they're inoculating themselves, the Jews, against Christianity. So that their own people do not convert. That seems to be because that diminishes an already underpopulated race. Now I have many other books that I could and would like to quote from, but this is getting long as it is. I'll do that in the future. So you can find various literature and books criticizing Muslims, obviously, but when it comes to companies selling books that Jews dislike, they're cut off from credit card payments and processing and debanked and everything, and deplatformed. The situation is exemplified by the Occidental Quarterly, which is Kevin MacDonald. I don't know if you know him. He wrote The Culture of Critique. All of his stuff is, I think The Culture of Critique you can get from various sources, but his Occidental Quarterly, which is a magazine, you have to send a money order online to get it. You can't use the credit card or a check, I guess. The Barnes Review is another one that just, which is where I got a copy of the Talmudic Jew, and where you can get one, but their credit card has been taken offline. Same thing with David Irving. His books, you can't find them unless they're used online, and you can't list them on eBay using his name. Just the titles. If you use his name, it's considered Holocaust denial. And then another is the Center for Open Debate on the Holocaust, or CODOH, where they have a lot of good books there. I would say the Red Cross had their on the whole issue of the Holocaust. It did happen, but the Red Cross estimated originally that it was around 500,000 people that were killed, and their killing and deaths were most likely a result of. Some were rounded up and shot. There's no doubt about that. But the concentration camps themselves, what happened in the end was a lot of them were places where weapons were being manufactured, and the Jews were working on them, so they were saturation bombed by the Allies. And then also by the end, the German people were starving in the millions. I think 7 to 11 million were starving. So the concentration camps didn't have enough food, so people had disease and died. I think that's why the gas chambers were actually were meant to disinfect Jews from getting disease, not kill them. But I allegedly, it could be wrong, and I don't want to get into that here. But my point is, if you want to get books on this, it's going to be very difficult, and that's really unfortunate. And again, if you want to know who governs you, observe who you cannot criticize. It's not obvious, isn't it? Now, as far as these books, I'm going to be getting a lot of these books, including the Talmudic Jew, which Candace Owens talked about. Though you can get it yourself at the Barnes Review, you'll need a money order. You can't use credit card, unfortunately, anymore. I'm going to be getting these books. Leave a comment if you want some juicy books on details, such as what I've expressed. Another good book is Judaism, Strange Gods, and you can go to www.revisionisthistory.org for Michael Hoffman's books, including this one, which I highly recommend. And otherwise, I do sell books and comics. I'm not really into comics, but I inherited a collection and therefore sell them. But books are what I'm into selling, is particularly books that I want to get out there, though it's risky because you can have your account taken down, suspended. But yeah, if you're interested in these books, do leave a comment. I can acquire them for you. In fact, they will be coming in about a week or two. The situation as far as information, and it almost verges on the destruction of the First Amendment and the destruction of the free press. Even Henry Ford, who wrote the Internationalist Jew, and published the Dearborn Independent, eventually had it shut down on ridiculous charges of some kind of libel by some Jewish thug who was part of the Jewish mafia and defended, I think, Al Capone or something like that. And yet Henry Ford, who was, General Motors and Ford, made a lot of money making cars, was unable to combat them to maintain free speech in the Dearborn Independent, even though what he said was true. So it's really quite scary. Historically, people seeking success align themselves with Jews, and take Churchill, for example, who was an abominable man. all you need to hear is Mark Levin saying, we'll cancel Jew haters, we cancel Churchill haters. That guy is crazy. And why Churchill haters? Well, because he loved the Jews and the Jews loved him. He helped a lot of their. He helped them a lot. There's a book called Churchill and the Jews, and he had a great relationship with them, and his career was greatly enhanced. And historically, if you help the Jews, you will be enriched, and you will be helped. Your career will go on fast forward. Eisenhower's another one. And yet, if you oppose them, you jeopardize your life, livelihood, and property. So this is risky business. And yeah, please let me know if... I mean, our country is captive to Israel, and I wonder if we'll ever be free. A theory about this, which I'll speak about in another video, but please let me know if you like this or not. This is the first video I've made in a long time, and yeah, I don't know if the quality's good. I don't know how well I've done, but I just wanted to get this out there. I hope it helps you. Please let me know if it does. And yeah, thank you for listening. If you've made it this far, thank you. And good luck. And I hope people wake up, because this situation is a matter of freedom, and a matter of freedom of speech, and it's also a matter of economic security. You know, our own people in America are struggling, and we have millions of dollars that go to... billions have gone to Israel, and bombs that support genocides. It's quite appalling, quite a sad situation. And this does not mean I hate all Jews. I certainly do not. Some of them are wonderful people, but and they're certainly not an inferior people. That is for sure. They are an intelligent people who are have a strong, cohesive community, and I admire that. I'm actually envious of it. I envy the fact that their community is so close knit. We Gentiles need to become closer with each other, and be better people to each other, be better to our families like they are to theirs. We need to learn from them. We need to emulate those positive factors, those positive traits. And yeah, that's that. Thank you for listening to this, and have a great day.